just checking everything out. My apologies. Very professional setup, so I'm sure you can tell. Very, very professional stuff. But you can get what you pay for, and I work cheap. So, okay. Here's where I try and catch up with some of this a little bit. Hey, somebody's already here and gave me the thumbs up. I haven't even done anything yet. See? See? It's all coming together. It's been pointed out to me that I don't talk enough, I don't explain enough about what I'm doing, what I'm thinking, etc. What I'm going to do first is I'm going to tackle this panel up here. It's the very first panel. Wait, I got to move everything over. This cable's just not long enough. It's going to bug the crap out of me the whole time. I cannot have it. Sorry, my apologies. Again, very professional show. All right. And now I have a little more slack to work with. Not this damn thing in my way. All right. What I'm going to do first is I am going to approach this very systematically. The way I start pages is I block in the blocks, and I also go ahead and figure out where my outside line weights, how those are going to be. I usually do that stuff first. Reason why I do this stuff first is typically I start kind of thinking on that kind of thing. So it's early in the morning. You can go a little thicker on these sorts of things. It's not the end of the world if you don't exactly hit. And groggy, it's first thing in the morning. So we'll start with something easy and just block off some black areas. That's how I would normally start my day, which back then was sometime around noon. I was usually up till 3 or 4 in the morning at least. Anyway, back to what we're doing here in the present. Hey, what's going on, G-Man? Just explain. I'm starting out by blocking off some blacks. What I like for something like that is a nice blunt sort of a pen. You need to go to a super sharp point, nice blunt brush markers. Pretty good for that. And if you hold this thing to get it a little bit of a side stroke, this uh, Faber-Castell pit pen, the brush pen that comes with the set, you play around with it, you can actually get a pretty fairly decent range of lines with it. Mike McMahon's here. What's going on? Yes, I am inking more Rob Norton. You know it, man. Yeah, I just picked something, honestly. I used to use my face, and then I was like, facial recognition's a thing. I probably shouldn't do that. Just some basic awareness of some security. I'm sure it's laughable, but okay. Seeing I went from just basically blocking off blacks and doing outside line weights. By the time that's done, you're like, well, crap, I may as well go ahead and do the rendering. And then you're pretty much finished with the thing. That's how you keep yourself motivated as a professional inker, too. You're tired of inking, you think, okay, well, I'll just ink this part. And you go, okay, well, I'll just ink that part before I go to bed. You just keep doing that, and the next thing you know, you think the whole thing. Can't wait to see this with letters. Yeah. I am not sure what to anticipate with this script at all. Rob's got a good sense of humor, though. I'm sure it'll be pretty funny. It should be pretty darn funny. Hope he does better dialogue than Liefeld does. Jeez. I kind of wonder if Liefeld's actually written anything. I can't remember anything where it wasn't like he would plot and then he would just get somebody to do the dialogue. I actually ever remember reading anything with a byline where he wrote the actual words. You know, it might have had a suggestion for a line or two here or there, and of course he's plotted the whole thing. But I don't know. I could be wrong. Something I'm forgetting, but I know that Jim Lee tried to write Divine Right. I'm not sure if he wrote all those, and I'm not sure how long that series went. And I don't think he's tried to write anything since, as far as writing the script goes. Okay, and at this point, since I had, basically it's an all black sort of thing. Since I had it all blocked off and the line weights in there and everything else, I'm like, okay, well, you may as well go ahead and fill in the blanks. Now, yeah, I can do this digitally, but I think people seem to enjoy the process of doing comics analog better than they like digital. Am I running out of ink in this damn cartridge? Is that what the hell is going on? No, this is not flowing as much as I'd like. Yeah, you know, I couldn't say honestly. I was so busy. Uh, I wasn't reading this stuff really. I mean, I did go to an editor at one point and say that, like, hey, I don't want to be a dick. I know everybody's working hard here, but I don't really read any of our books. I don't really like any of our characters. I'm a comic fan. I grew up reading this stuff. I love this stuff. That's why I'm here. Mm, like they asked for suggestions, things like this. I just gave them some basics. It's like, look, man, I couldn't for the life of you tell you the quote unquote secret identity name of any of these characters. Like what do they do when they're not in their Wildcat suit, looking to kick ass on the Damonites and their associates because it's always the Damonites, right? Oh, no, that's not what I'm doing. Yeah, the Damonites. There was a role playing game I remember years ago, similar to Dungeons and Dragons, but it was set in space. And TSR put it out. It was called Star Frontiers. And the problem, like, look, I was a big fan of science fiction. I grew up watching like Star Trek and Space 1999 and all kinds of science fiction. So, Star Wars, the Battlestar Galactica, Buck Rogers, you name it, man. If it was, it was like a space type show, I was probably into it. Um, and yeah, so I don't like that kind of stuff. There we go. Yeah, we're getting the push to flow a little bit better, maybe. Yeah, I was never particularly interested in any of the Wildstorm books. Like, we don't know who any of these people are. Anyway, that's where I was going. I lost track of my story for a second. Star Frontiers. Star Frontiers, every adventure that you would play that TSR put out about Star Frontiers, it inevitably came back to their enemy, the Sathar. It was always the same foe, always the same aliens, never any variation. Every single monster you would buy. Eventually, I stopped buying them and like, well, you make up your own adventures if this is the best they're gonna do. And that's what Wildcats always, you know, uh, uh, what always reminded me of because it always came back to fucking Hellspawn and the Damonites. Okay, I think. Jim spent a little too long on the X Men with the X Men in space and their what was their damn thing? Not the Shi'ar. Those damn lizard bug people that the X Men were fighting. Who were they anyway? I forget. Anyway, somebody will know. Yeah, the Youngblood Shaft's real name is Jeff. That's more than I know about any of them. Okay, the Brood. Yes, the Brood. Which, let's face it, though that's the Dame Knights may have been heavily modeled after the Brood. Okay, yeah, we're gonna do the same thing here. Basically, we're gonna block off blacks. It's my shorthand for bushes because those will not be the finished bushes. Those will wind up just being there as kind of a placeholder, and then they'll come in digitally And I've got a nice leaf brush that does a great job. Stuff like that. Still got your brush pen. And I don't use this Pentel brush pen for anything of much delicacy. Uh, it's going to be a delicate thing. I have another brush that I pull out for that. But for just blocking off blacks, this is fine. I don't know what that is, so we're going to employ a little bit of Wallywood technique there. When in doubt, black it out. No, I'm just doing that because I can come in and pop it in digitally. It's not a problem. Same thing with this sword. It's going to look a lot better once I come in and touch it up digitally. 93 degrees over there. I tell you what, I got you beat. 93 would be a relatively cool day. You just subbed. Hey, Von Beardo, welcome. Welcome. Glad to have you. Not the most exciting show on YouTube. I promise you that. But, most of us are older here. We got weaker hearts. A lot of excitement's probably really not good. Yeah, stream with me, Rob, and Ginger Bear House too. We have done a couple of streams like that. Well, we haven't done one lately, but we did do a couple of months back. We were doing them on Saturdays for a little bit. I'll have to talk to Ginger Bear and see if he's up for doing some of that again. A lot of the times the problem with that is too, is like my computer's not being cooperative. Let's just be nice and say it like that. Not call it a piece of shit or cuss at it. Don't have the setup for it. I don't really have much, but a setup for it either. I wish I had a front setup like you see some of these guys have like I've seen Frank Cho's. Frank Cho's setup is great. He's got this awesome like scaffolding system that holds his camera and his lights and stuff. It's all set up above his drawing table. He's all set and ready. It looks awesome. But I just don't have the finances to throw at that or the space to put it. I mean, like, man, my setup. I'm in a common area of the house. And got to let people know, like, okay, I'm on a live stream, so try and be quiet if you can. And go yelling shit across the house. So, but yeah, like the idea of having a YouTube room or a studio and lights and camera setups all around it, forget that, man. I just don't have it. It'd be nice, but a lot of things would be. The tree that you see me doing these lines, and it was like, okay, you said you were going to explain. I'm just trying to keep very loose, keep the tip of my brush. I'm just sort of dabbing it around and try and keep the thinnest line I can keep. And also, when I do a line so that it's a very organic line, I try to sort of jerk it. I want to control it, but not control it at the same time. You know, a loose, spontaneous sort of line with it. But you don't want it so out of control it like goes in an area you don't want it. You want to control the result you're getting. Make sure you're getting the proper texture. Things like this. And people are like, hey, Mr. Tracer, you're supposed to hit all those lines. You're skipping a bunch of stuff. Because I'm doing all my lines going the same direction this way. And I'm going to come back in on the trees again and do the other stuff. But while I have the brush in hand, I'm making this motion that's giving me this tree bark texture. May as well do it all the way across the panel, right? Okay. And now the brush pen goes away. And then I'm going to get out the, this is the Kuretaka. No, this is the Tombow. Tombow Food Nisaki. It gives it a little more texture. Just trying to add texture. I'm trying to think of too, trying to keep a consistent sort of light source as best as you can. Like as I inking these figures, I have the light coming from in front and the characters coming at this sort of an angle. Slinging ink as fast as David Finch draws. Well, that's the idea. See, it's the secret to all this. You're drawing in ink. Now there are some times when I crunch down and get a little more precious what kinds of lines and stuff that I'm doing. But like trees and organic stuff, grasses and things like that, nobody is looking at that worth a shit. Okay? So there's your freedom to play. There's your freedom to warm up when you're groggy. There's your freedom to experiment and make mistakes. There it is. Because guess what? No penciler's going to care about any of this. Unless it's Jim Lee and what they've done is just absolutely so amazing and stunning. It's unreal. Don't worry about it. It'll probably be just loosely indicated like this is here. And if anything, the inker's kind of counting on you to lend some of the texture that's been indicated. Like when Rob puts that down, he's counting on the fact that I'm going to make those trees, I'm going to make those textures look more like the bark of a tree. He knows I'm going to do that. Okay. Now we're going to get into some line weights. Okay. So, what I'm going to do with that, we're gonna have a strategy for this. First of all, for this, what I'm going to use my I'm going to start out with my Tombow Food Nisaki soft tip. And I'm going to do all the line weights on these guys back here. I just keep the tops of all the objects fairly thin, and when it comes around the object, it's curving around, you get thicker. Okay, the light would be hitting here as the form turns under. It's going to catch that shadow. What the hell's going on with your hand, bro? Reaching behind your back? Is that that? Yeah, I guess so. All right. If you say so, man. Uh, Something where the pencil's got the lines sort of broken up. Again, the tops of the forms are getting nice thin lines. That's when your breaks are going to occur in the line. What those breaks in the line are supposed to be representing is possible light's hitting it so brightly that it's completely blurred out the outline entirely. The undersides are like, okay, the light's hitting it from up there, so the undersides of all this. See how bold I can go there? And I'll get away with it too. It just looks like a cast shadow on the arm. Now, you can't do this with everybody. Like if you're a beginning if you're a beginning inker and you're working over a penciler and it's a professional gig and you got a pencil that's picky, you do not have this much leeway in what you do or what you don't do. Um, but I've got quite a bit of experience. But I'll trust my judgment. I keep seeing some Mignola creeping into Rob's stuff a little bit. Again, I'm just kind of blocking off blacks. Blocking off black areas. If they're small, I go ahead and fill them in. Now, when I'm inking traditionally, I will try to save filling in at least the large black areas until towards the end of the page. Because a lot of times you'll have to battle what I'm used to anyway, which I don't know whether these would do it or not. I haven't really tested it. I've been dealing with blue lines. But what you would have to worry about is you run an eraser over this whole thing to erase their pencils. And now has that faded the ink? Does it all show up the way it's supposed to still? I've seen guys basically re-inking jobs that like you inked it and then you erased it, and guess what? Now you get to ink it again. Except this time, because some of your old ink is laying there, and you got to try and lay the ink in there in such a way as it covers those spots but doesn't go over. It's just a nightmare. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I'm just trying to do the outside line weights, and then if I see any blacks that need to be filled in, if they're small, go ahead and fill them in. What will happen a lot of times, a lot of inkers will be like, "Oh, I'll leave that to the last, right?" And then you get so used to looking at it, it all looks right to you, and you don't notice this huge black area that's left undone. I have a great big X in the middle of it to indicate that you're supposed to fill it in, and everything else, and you just space it right out. So you learn. Go ahead and fill those suckers in as you go. And you're not better off. Sorry, got my big hand in the way. Tell me, not used to doing this for anybody else to look at it. Okay, it's getting too tiny for this pen. This is a Pentel Energel needle tip, 0.3 millimeter. Really, really teeny, teeny, tiny little pen. Too tiny. And go to the Tombow Food Nisaki hard tip. People have told me that before. Like, why you throw those lines with such confidence and so quickly? And like, you know what? If I don't throw the line quickly you will be able to see it in the line. If my line is not confident, if it's hesitant, if I'm trying to fake like I know what I'm throwing down when I really don't know what I'm throwing down, it shows. So you gotta basically make like a silent agreement with the penciler. When you see their stuff, you'll see what they put down and examine it for half a second and go, oh, okay, that's supposed to be that. And then you just do that along with them, you know? Because like if you ink something thinking it was supposed to be something else, and guess what? On those late times where I'm undone deadline wise, and back in the old days, there were some times where I was inking. It sounds ridiculous. I think about it now. It sounds like a tall tale. But yeah, there were times when I would find myself inking for 30 hours at a stretch on like 6 hours sleep, sometimes five. And you do that a couple of three times a week. You know, you just work basically till you couldn't work anymore and then go to sleep for the minimum amount of time you could get away with it and then get up and work some more. I was young. I had that kind of energy to burn. My top overrated comic artist. You always want to talk about stuff that's going to stir up shit. No, I'm not gonna. Hey, who would you like to bash while you're on live stream right now? No, fuck that, dude, man. I'm not doing that. Any other controversial topics that you want to bring up and try and put me in that kind of situation? You can stuff them in your hat, sir. I won't be doing that. I am not a mudslinger. Oh yeah, I understand. You gotta try. Let's see if he's paying attention. Will he say something stupid? No, not ready to say anything stupid. Quite frankly, if I did tell you who I thought was the most overrated penciler of all time, wow, people wouldn't believe it. Oh my god, really, that guy? Yeah, kinda, that guy. Mm-mm-mm. Always try my best when I'm rendering forms to articulate that form. I'm thinking of the front, I'm thinking of the sides, I'm thinking of the depth and how close it is to you. And I'm also thinking about readability too. Like, I put a bunch of detail in on stuff like this, right? And by the time this gets shot down to the comic page, so Dinky won't be able to see any of this stuff that I'm doing. And for the last several years, I've been working digitally, so I thought it was faster and easier. You don't have to take the time to scan and all these things like you have to do with analog artwork. And but nobody likes to really watch the digital ink as much. They like it when I'm throwing the real ink. And I'm like, well, if that's what they want to see, no reason I can't ink these panels, scan them in, pop it in the artwork later. Um, Let me see if I can get away with this. How much more and what do I do to them digitally once I scan them? Um, it really just depends upon the page. Um, there's sometimes where I'll ink the whole thing analog and then I get it scanned in and I decide I don't like it. And redo it digitally anyway. Now that is not something that you should be doing or have the luxury of doing if you're working in a professional setting. But I'm really more of a hobbyist at this point. I make sure my deadlines are not so intense that I have to deal with some of these things like I used to. Um, it really just depends. Like, okay, like for instance, I probably won't ink any of this grass. All these grass and weeds, all this shit. I probably won't ink any of it because it'll be easier to do digitally. Good portions of fur might get reworked because that's a texture, or I've got a brush for that digitally, and it does a better job than I would hand rendering it. There's times where I definitely take advantage of the fact that I'm going to be doing stuff digitally. That I am in charge of the scan. Like, okay, I can do this sloppily because I'm going to go back over it. Why do I not fill these in? If I don't feel the need to fill it in, I don't have to because it's just a click digitally. you know. But sometimes when it comes to some of these things, it actually winds up being easier to do it analog. Okay, this is towards the front of the panel. Okay, I'm gonna lengthen the leg at the same time. So I think this leg looks a little small in proportion to what Rob's got going on with this. So you'll see me like change the line, but try and keep the same sort of line that Rob has going. So I'm just gonna move it over here. See, I'm not even gonna mess with it a whole lot. Again, just blocking out the blacks. This is what I do digitally too. Basically, I'll come in and do the line weights first, blocking the blacks. And the key to stuff like that too, when you're laying that in, is anytime you make a line, you don't want it to just be a dead line unless you don't want people paying attention to it. Any line that you want people paying attention to should be moving from thin to thick, or from thick to thin, or from slow to fast. Because, like I said, you can see that sort of shit in the line. Um, I also want to make sure that if there's a shape, whether it be a white shape or a black shape, if it comes to a corner, make sure there's a nice sharp point the corner of these white spaces that I'm throwing in there if I can. It's one of those things that stylistically makes stuff pop a little better. You notice even here when I'm doing it, I'm doing a straight line that way, and then I'm going to cut into it this way diagonally. So I got that sharp corner going on there. I want to start with a real thin line and move to a little thicker, a little thicker, a little thicker. Variation in line weight. Okay. Slowing me down to chit chat. On Photoshop, you use the brushes when you use backgrounds. I know all the tricks of the trade. Nah, I wouldn't say that. But, you know, some of the stuff you pick up by accident. I'm still learning. I turned to digitally, doing stuff digitally probably 8 years ago, 9 years ago. And even after all the time that I already had as a professional, there were things that I figured out from learning digitally that I may never have figured out if I hadn't dabbled in that. Still blocking out the blacks. Anytime I see an opportunity like this, where there's lines coming out of a black like that, you don't want it to look like blank space, lines, black. Okay, what you're trying to do. Sorry, got a spear broken on my brush. What you're trying to do is you're trying to create the illusion of shading from light to medium tone to dark and finally to black. So anything you can do to do that to help that along is better. So when it comes like a black like this, sometimes as it comes out of it, I will go ahead and break it up into lines like that. Because what that's doing is continuing that illusion, that gradiated tone. Oops. Did not mean to close that up there. No, it's supposed to be a white space right there. But nice thing about digitally touching up, you can go back in and fix it. Even if you have to redo it from scratch, you can make it happen. Sometimes working analog, it's just not an option you can do. Happy accidents. Bob Ross was an army drill instructor long before he became a painter. Like one of those guys that yells at you and chews you out. That was the happy little trees guy. He wasn't talking about happy little accidents back then. Everybody talks about the Pentel pocket brush. This is I use the number 8, the Kuretaka. No, there's a number 7 and a number 8 brush pen. This is the one with the real bristles. It works like a real brush does. The other one is really more of a marker, a very flexible tip, like a multi-liner kind of thing. See, like here, I'm going to make a change to the pencils because I think there should be an outline. I think there should be a halo right here. So I'm going to go ahead and do the line weights. The way you might normally do. And then just leave this little white piece there. The same deal here. Since this is our closest object, I can get away with some real heavy lines on the underside if I want to. Because this is as close as we're going to get to anything. And then make another change. There's the bottom of the palm. There's the shadow underneath the palm. There's the outline. Now, that is not the sort of thing I advise any beginning inker to do. Making a change in the pencils, that's the sort of thing that will get you fired. Quick, fast, in a hurry. You get a touchy penciler, and they will hit the roof. Make sure your editor hears all about what a piece of shit you are. Changing their precious stuff. But again, I've had 30 years experience. Rob trusts what I do, so I don't have to worry about that kind of thing. Have I ever used felt pens? Yeah, I'm using felt pens now. I used them quite a bit when I used to do storyboard work. After Wildstorm, I got into doing storyboards for Universal Pictures, and I was working with former Marvel DC artist and animation guy Rick Hoberg, and we worked on I'm really dating it. The Mummy animated series, the Mummy movie that was Brendan Fraser from the movies. This was the Saturday morning cartoon based on that movie. I think it lasted 3 seasons. But yeah, storyboards you can get away with whatever you want. You can comic pages and like these pencils will get upset. So if you're using markers and the markers discolor, well, then they go to try and resell the page and the buyer it because the marker has discolored and it doesn't look the same way it printed in the book, and now they don't want to buy the page. Well, if you're the penciler working with an inker and the inkers use that full tip to fill in the blacks on their page and it's faded like that, and he does that all the time, then you might stop using that inker. So if it wasn't like India ink and brush with India ink back in the day, I didn't usually mess with it. I really don't like microns either, and microns, that's pretty much all they had. That was the only act in town back then. So technical pens, yeah. I use technical pens. Those are good for stuff like templates, French curves, things like that. You try and do mechanical stuff, it's nice because that deadline leaves itself to technical work pretty good. It's real cold and unfeeling, which is why I don't recommend it when people try and use the ink people and things like this. But My wife's trying to cough all quietly. She's walking out of the room. She's so sweet. Oh wow. I've already been here for almost an hour and a half. But hey, on the good side, I finished just about half a page here. Or at least it will be a half a page by the time I finish here. The other thing I do too after in post, after I get done with all the analog inking, is anything I don't like, or if I've blown it on a grad, or need to thin a line out, or anything like that. If it needs to get redone, it's a lot easier to correct it digitally than it is to try and correct it analog. Just because the nature of trying to correct shit in ink. Oh, cool. I put a dent in a half a page or so, which is pretty fast for me at this stage. I'll be able to scan this and get this sucker done. Bickety bam. I do want to finish my thought on a couple things. Oh, see. All right. I think I'm going to call it quits for the evening, folks. Get kind of tired here. In time for old men to hit the sack. But you got to watch me do that half a page, and I got some more printed out. So I'll probably be back here tomorrow night if I can. So thanks for joining me, everybody that tuned in to take a look at this boring crap that I do here. All right. Thanks for tuning in, folks. We'll see you later, okay? Bye.